Excuse me. Realtist, Real Talk Podcast. Hello, fellow Realtists. Thank you for joining us at the Realtist Real Talk Podcast. I am Amber Lewis.
And I'm Rob Pastor.
And today we have Phyllis Dickerson, CEO of the African Americans Mayors Association. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
So let's just start. What is the African Americans Mayors Association?
So we officially call it AAMA,
Okay.
but it is a 501c3 that we advocate for policy on the federal level for mayors. So we are unapologetically Black.
Mm-hmm.
So it is only Black mayors that can join our association. We represent over 500 mayors around the U.S. from big, mid, and small cities. And so we advocate for policy on the federal level. We do some training and development. As you notice, you've seen a movement of under 40 Black mayors.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Cleveland,
so
Ohio
we need some
specifically.
training and development just to make sure, they have what they need. And
Love
we
that.
definitely share best practices between our cities.
That's interesting. So how old is your organization?
So we only got developed in 2014, but before that, it was called the U.S. Conference of Black Mayors. And before that, it was called the U.S. Conference of Southern Black Mayors. So back in the days when Congressman Benny Thompson was a mayor, he was a member of that. Back in the day when Mayor Jackson was around and Mary Berry were mayors, they were members of the U.S. Conference of Black Mayors.
Okay.
So then you see it evolve to where you have it now.
Okay.
Oh, that's amazing. Because I have seen young Black mayors getting elected across the country.
And I have to kind of shout out Cleveland, Ohio, because we have Justin Bibb, who is under 40 and a young Black mayor.
In Cleveland.
So we're representing.
You have Mayor Johnson out of Milwaukee. You have St. Paul, Melvin Carter. You have Little Rock, Frank Scott. So you have this movement of young Black mayors.
Regeneration.
It's not just a moment, it is a movement.
Yes.
100%. That's interesting. So it's Toledo, from Toledo, Ohio. We have had 2 Black mayors. One was elected, 3. I take that back. 2 were elected and one, she was appointed because our mayor passed away. How does a young Black person balance the issues of the city as well as the issues of the Black community?
So I always tell people, I'm a former mayor, chief of staff. So let me put on my chief of staff hat for a second. So my mayor was a white male. And for the most part, white men or Black male mayors don't hire Black female chief of staff. It's just an uncomfortable place. And so even when I was in that space, they would be like, what do you do for him? And I would be like, I'm the chief of staff. Why is that impossible, right? And so, but the balance of the weight of the job is heavier for a Black mayor because the expectation is different.
Yes.
We've experienced it. We've all been stopped by the police. I don't care if you're a male or female. We've all had those uncomfortable, situations there. I always tell this story about one of my friends. He called me one day and said, I want to know why they pick up the white folks' trash and didn't pick up mine. And I said, oh, hold on. And he didn't know I was in the office with the mayor. And I said, Mayor, he wants to know, and I called his name, why did they pick up the white people's trash in his all-white neighborhood and not pick up his? Wow. And the mayor picked up the phone and said, man, is your garbage man Black? And he said, yeah. And he said, well, he really don't like you. So they both laughed, right? And so it became, instead of a contentious moment, it became a laughable moment. And so the mayor said, well, what's your address? So the mayor's typing it in and gives him his address. He said, is your garbage can still in the corner? He said, yeah. And he said, okay. They'll be back picking up in 15 minutes, right?
That's awesome.
And so sometimes it is even perception. It's 9-10-7. And so we go to church with each other. We go to the same grocery store. We grew up being Black. And so people, they're like, did you see me? And when we have Black mayors in this situation, they know they are seeing me.
Yes.
And so, but they want the problems resolved even quicker. And there is no crystal ball.
Right.
I don't care if it's a black mayor or a white mayor. Right now, public safety is a #1 issue, and so is mental health issue post-COVID. And so with that in mind, but they think it's a crystal ball. But if you are a bad parent that raised a child that is not responsible, how is that the mayor's fault?
That's real.
I mean, and so we have to be really honest with each other. And so what we have said, even from a public safety standpoint, we had a gun summit in New York with Eric Adams. And one of the things that I said was, we got to have a Mamie Till moment. So we are talking about these AAR-15s, but we're not seeing what they're doing to our children. And so most people don't know, these parents are identifying their children by the shoes they have on or their clothing.
That's all.
Which is just like a Mamie Till moment, because remember, it was his ring that his father gave him.
Oh my goodness. That
he was wearing, and so she knew that was her son. And so with that in mind, who will be Mamie? Because when we have the next mass shooting, you know what we'll see? Flowers, teddy bears, and the picture of what they look like before the shooting. But we will never see the devastation to their body.
And that's big. Gun violence is running rampant.
It is running rampant.
And it's like, what other solutions? But they look to the mayor. I see on Facebook. Facebook is crazy when it comes to talking about mayors. What's the mayor doing about this? But it's like, what really can a mayor do?
Right. And I always ask the person that asks me that, I said, what's your solution? What's your solution? When somebody walks in a church or school or grocery store or whatever, because I was in a city that had a mass shooting, I think we had 21 or 22, but we didn't have any loss of life. But it is a horrible feeling to get that call at 2 o'clock in the morning or even the middle of the day to say, we just had a mass shooting.
Yeah.
It's a horrible feeling as a mayor. Because more than likely, especially if they were all black, they probably know those people. They know somebody in the group.
Right.
Absolutely, 100%.
So taking us to, I think, the Sheba report also for today. When I think about what we learned, we were at 50% and we've gone back to 45%. We know that we can affect a change and we have some calls of action for the future. What do you think are going to be kind of the nuggets that you take back to your association, share holistically with your mayors, and say, okay, how can we come up with a strategy to also be a voice of this change?
So as it relates to home ownership,
yes,
right?
Black home ownership specifically.
So we just got a grant.
Okay.
That we're going to put together Economic Mobility Institute. We're piloting it with 9 cities that represent almost half of the black population. So they are very black cities.
Okay.
So one of the pillars in the institute is home ownership. And so we are also going to teach the young people like you that when you inherit that property, don't necessarily sell it just because you don't want to live in it. You can have heirs property and teach them how to use that heirs property even for financial benefit, whether it's Airbnb. You know, some people, I'm originally from Arkansas, so you have a lot of inheritance as it relates to farmland or rural property. But you don't have to farm the land, you can lease the land. And you can still benefit it from it financially, because in your age group, a lot of people don't want to sign a 30-year mortgage, and that's okay. But how can you keep and maintain the property still, even if it's an Airbnb? In Arkansas, we have deer camps. Make it a deer camp. You know, make it a dove camp. Those kinds of things are recreational activities that you can still draw income from. And so we will be creating this Economic Mobility Institute to talk about home ownership, how we increase the numbers in these particular 9 cities, and then heirs property, wills and trust, debt reduction, student loan elimination. Those are the kind of things that hold us back from home ownership. And when we address these things with the mayors, it's almost like a toolkit and a pilot. So we have a big city representing mid-sized cities and small cities so that we cover the gamut, because the issue may be different, or the barriers may be different depending on the city, especially if it's a more rural city. You may not have a land bank commission. So how do you create one? And those are the kind of conversations that are real conversations. You got to remember, if you're under, I'm almost 60 now, but if you're under 40, and you're a brand in there, you probably won because you were activists doing Black Lives Matter and things like that. But what you have to remember at the end of the day, they don't have all the answers. They're coming in with just the knowledge they had from the campaign, right? So we have to give them, and that's that sharing and training and best practices. So NAREB is on our business council now.
Awesome.
We are also advocating for our cities that we represent to put one NAREB member on each one of their land bank commissions, because then you bring a different voice to the table. Because not only is it imperative that you be on there, but you help us to institute policy. So like in certain cities, not only do you get to buy the property out of land bank, but you got 2 years to develop it. So you're not holding that property hostage. But there are other cities that these people just buy up the land and they don't do anything with it. In New York, they do some out of the box thinking because they're landlocked. Guess what? A lot of people didn't go back to church. Churches have the most property in New York. So guess what they're doing? They're having developers go in, buy the church, allow the church to still have space in the new development, and then create housing and retail on the top levels.
Wow. That's a really big thing, specifically in Ohio and Toledo. Ohio is the land bank is I'm not going to say it's a point of contention, but I do see disparity in the fact that, all right, there's a process to the land bank, and the land bank has an application process. They do a background check. They want to know if you have what other properties you own, any back taxes. They want to see what you're going to do to the property, spell it out literally line by line, letter by letter, what you're going to do, how much you're going to spend, where you're getting the money from, who's going to do the work. And so it creates a situation where a lot of people can't get through that. So the land bank in one of our neighborhoods in Toledo, Ohio, is called the Junction neighborhood, which is majority black. The land bank is the majority landowner in this neighborhood, but the people in the neighborhood aren't able to get through the process. But then you have people like the mayor saying, "Oh, invest in this neighborhood." It's like, what are we? Is this gentrification? It's gentrification.
Right.
So,
and we don't talk about it. And so until we get the right people at the table, then you can address what those issues are. Another issue that I just talked about on the panel that we don't address is gentrification. So it's nice that you come in and put a new development here, but you also just increase Mrs. Jones' property value by $80,000. So now her property taxes go up because you don't have her locked in at a certain age. There are cities where she is grandfathered in to her lower tax rate. So when you come in and do this multi-million-dollar development, it doesn't affect her, but it does increase her even though it does increase her property value, it works toward her benefit, which should always happen. But she should not have to struggle to pay her personal property taxes when she already paid her house off 30 years ago. Come on now.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's real. I think in Toledo we call that a homestead exemption. We have homestead exemptions, but wow. So I mean, I think that's a very powerful potential between AAMA and NAREB. You know, because mayors are in a position to execute and create policies and also execute on them, and NAREB has the information and best practices from across the country.
And it's not just NAREB and AAMA. It's also on the federal level with Secretary Fudge. When we say, you know, we're not talking about citizenship in the right way as it relates to housing. So where am I supposed to stay when I get out? And so if I can't stay in public housing, then where am I supposed to stay that I can afford until I get the job that I need to be able to pay for my rent or lease or home ownership? It's those type of questions that Secretary Fudge gets, because guess what? She used to be the mayor of Warrensville, Ohio.
Absolutely, yes.
So she speaks the language.
100%.
Secretary Buttigieg in transportation, he speaks the language.
Wow.
Secretary Wash in labor, former mayor, he speaks the language. And so when we put the right people from the federal, state, and local level in place, then we can start to really penetrate where the obstacles and barriers are, and speak for the Ms. Joneses that feel like they don't have a voice.
Yeah.
Well, in closing, what do you think are things that Realtist members can do to undergird their local mayors?
So I think that what we're going to create long term for this next year with NAREB is this housing toolkit. So we can pass it on to the mayor, who can pass it on to their staff person to say, listen, this is not going to happen unless we check these boxes and put this in place. And it has got to make sure it encompasses the big city, which is the cities like New York, LA, Chicago, and Houston, which may be landlocked. Houston, not so much landlocked, but when you get to New York, they're landlocked. So they're like sitting there like, okay, we're supposed to put new housing. The church, look at that church right there. They out of the box thinking. When we talk about there are not as many kids in public school, well then if we condense them to a different school, down to a different school, can we use that land where that school was and do a whole new development? So we have got to be more innovative, and as Black people, we've always been innovative. That's not new to us. We just have to make sure we have a seat at the table. And so when we're talking to our mayors, help them, because they're dealing with trash and planning and parks and recreation, and they're juggling a whole lot of places trying to make sure none of them fall. But if you give them the playbook, then they can hand it off to somebody to execute. And if you help them monitor the person that's supposed to be executing and say, look, you have this land bank, you established it, but these people are just holding this property and they haven't developed it. And the mayor's like, oh, really? Because he may have taken his eyes off the ball, right?
Yeah.
And then you say, you need to put something in place that they have 2 years to develop it. He's like, and get that done.
Make it simple.
And if you don't develop it in 2 years, it goes back into the land bank.
Wow, yeah.
Point blank, end of the subject.
Accountability.
So help them manage themselves. I always say inspect what you expect. And so help them inspect what they expect.
I like that. Well, Phyllis, we appreciate you for joining us.
We're excited for the partnership. We're excited about what's to come. Sounds like a great, great product. I think that the program that you're creating is going to be, in my opinion, something that's needed. I mean, going back to undergirding and having younger mayors, they don't know what they don't know. And you have to lean on the people that do. And it's a partnership. And we want our communities to thrive at the end of the day. And that's what's important.
Right. And for the first time in history, we represent the top 4 cities in the U.S.
That's so powerful.
Top 4.
That's awesome.
New York, L.A., Chicago.
That's only the beginning. Only the beginning.
It's only the beginning.
100%.
Well, we thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.